in here, it is cold in here, it is cold in here. Does anyone remember when Miley did that on The Voice? Just me? Just me. Let me get my handy dandy reading stats open and ready to go. What if I actually didn't remember actually hitting record? And the first thing that we have to talk about is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. So I made mention of this in my March wrap-up because I started this book in March. And then from March 24th until April 10th, my entire personality revolved around Beartown, Us Against You, and The Winners. And there's a multitude of trigger warnings that you should probably be aware of if you feel that there's things that you can't read about. But the gist of this story is that you're following a hockey team. Just like Anxious People is a hostage story, it is also about so much more than that. In Beartown, the Beartown trilogy, why is there hair on my face? The Beartown trilogy also is not just a hockey story. I think that if you're able to go into these a little blind and there's not trigger warnings that would, if you're okay to go in unaware of those, I think that you will change your reading experience. I only went in knowing that it was a hockey story. I don't typically look at trigger warnings, and I'm typically okay with that, but I understand that that's not the case for everybody. But I was reading Beartown, and 3-4 days into reading this book, I got to a point in the story where everything about the dynamic of these people's lives changed. And from that moment on, I could not read fast enough. I could not figure out, I needed to know what happened to these characters. And it became, at the minute I finished these books, I put all 3 of them in my car and brought them to my best friend's house. And I said, here, your turn. So I don't have them to hold up for you, but the amount of highlighted quotes in these books, the amount of writing in these books, the amount of tears in these books, everything about these books, from the characters to the writing to the plot to the twists and turns to the foreshadowing, Fredrik Backman understands the human condition in a way that I don't think anyone else does. And I say that knowing that, like, there's people who, like, obviously, like, have degrees in psychology and sociology and all these things, and there's people out there who probably by definition have a bigger, greater understanding of what it means to be a person. Like, I get that. Something about Fredrik Backman's writing will consistently sit as top tier in my book. I gave Beartown 4.75 stars. I gave Us Against You 5 stars. And I gave The Winners 4 stars. As a collective, as a whole, I think that every part of these books, every character in these books has a moment in the story where you stop and you read a line and you're like, that is one of the best ways to put that feeling or that fear or situation into the most perfect, beautiful context. And I could probably talk about these for way too long. The moral of the story here is that these books altered my brain chemistry for 20-something days. It's probably not that many. It's probably more like 2 weeks. More like 2 weeks. But In March, when I was reading Beartown and I got to that point, I could not, sometimes I read like more than one book at a time. Like I'll be physically reading a book and I'll have an audiobook going or an ebook going. Once I got to that point in Beartown, the rest of my reading for the month of March was absolutely ruined by the fact that I had to read all 3 of these books immediately. So that is why Beartown, book 1 of April, Us Against You, book 2 of April, and The Winners, book 3 of April, took absolute precedence once when I started reading Beartown in March. So those are the first 3 books that I read in April. Following that, I read White Cat, Black Dog by Kelly Link. Now, this is a collection of short stories, and there's 7 short stories in the book, and there were 3, The White Cat's Divorce, Prince Hat Underground, and Skinder's Veil, that I felt like I really enjoyed. Those were the first 2 stories and the final story of the collection. And for me, if all of the stories would have been in similar vibe to those 3 stories, I think I could have given this a much higher rating. I ended up settling on 3 stars. I kind of just took each story's rating that I gave it and came up with like an average rating for the whole book. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. I enjoyed certain parts of this, but it definitely takes a very weird turn in each story, has its own very odd kind of storyline. But I definitely don't think that I enjoyed all of them as much as I simply enjoyed those 3. I've never really read a collection of fantasy horror short stories, so this definitely was kind of a step out of my comfort zone, and I had a good time. The next book, which would be number 5 for the month of April, is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy. I've heard people pronounce her name 700 different ways, so I really don't know what the answer is. I gave this 4 stars, and honestly, I think this could be like a 4.5, if not a 5 star. This is a pretty short one. How many pages is this book? I got this one from Book of the Month, and okay, it's like just about 300 pages. Charlotte's writing is very atmospheric. Like the setting in her books is almost like its own character. And I think that I enjoyed this one far more than I enjoyed Once There Were Wolves. Where is it? Once There Were Wolves, I don't remember what rating I gave this when I read it. But I think that the focal point in this is actually the setting. Like, I don't remember much of the actual plot and the story. And that might just be because of my own reading tastes and my own opinions, but this one was nowhere near as great as this one for me. And I think that just the concept of this story and the mystery that's kind of, you're trying to figure out why this woman washes up on shore to this island that nobody really should be on. All of those pieces were only made more interesting by the setting of the story. So I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars in my book, but I probably could have given this a 4.5. Collectively, the book was really great. I definitely would recommend picking this one up, especially if you didn't like Once There Were Wolves. If that one wasn't like a 5-star book for you, I feel like that you should give her another chance and pick this one up. And even if you loved that one, I almost think that you're still going to like this one even more, if that makes sense. The 6th book that I read in April is Lovely War by Julie Berry. Now, this one's synopsis is so interesting because you're reading about World War I and World War II through the eyes of the Greek gods. This concept alone is so fascinating. I also gave this 4 stars. As a historical fiction, with this like fantasy element to it, obviously through hearing the story through the Greek gods, I think that it became more than just a story about war, and even the romance is made so much more complex because you're hearing it through Aphrodite and I think Hades and who else is in here? I forget the other ones that you hear. Apollo, Ares. So you're not just getting the story through the eyes of the people that it's actually happening to. You're getting it through these Greek gods. And for that, I think that this story is so much more intricate than like your typical World War I, World War II novel. I found certain lines of this book absolutely beautiful. I think that I absolutely understand why so many people like have fallen in love with this book and have cried reading this book. So this is a pretty interesting one, and I think that again the synopsis is the concept was so unique that it truly made the story more fascinating to read about. Following that, I read Emily Henry's Great Big Beautiful Life. Now, this book is no secret to being reviewed right now. So many people are talking about this, and so many people have not enjoyed this. And personally, I ended up giving this 4.75 stars. And I know, you're going to be like, excuse me, you did what? I really enjoyed this. Now, I will say that this is the first time I have picked up an Emily Henry book and have immediately compared it to another book. The minute I started reading this, I said, this is Emily Henry's The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And as much as I do think that this book may have taken inspiration from Evelyn Hugo, I found that Alice as a character was very relatable to me. Like, I felt certain parts of her character I really resonated with. And for that alone, the story, like, I don't think that the romance takes center stage in this book. And obviously, that's what most people picking this up are looking for. So I think that for me, these other like pieces of the puzzle that I found that I enjoyed of this, I didn't need the romance to be center stage. And that's funny because obviously like this is a romance novel. So I understand why this book is getting lower reviews. Like, it makes perfect sense to me. For me, at least, I really liked Alice. And I really liked that we had like a bit of a mystery going on at the same time that we were getting Alice and Hayden's story. So I understand why this one's not getting as great of ratings as some of her other books. Can we also just please appreciate how gorgeous the book is? I mean, come on, please. These end pages, I can't. So yes, I gave this 4.75 stars. It could probably be a 4.5. But yeah, for me, I really enjoyed this. If you go into this not solely looking for romance and you're okay with the romance kind of being on the back burner a little bit to the actual plot of the story and even just Alice as a character, I think that you can enjoy this. Obviously, most people are going into this looking for a romance novel. After that, I read the 8th book that I read this month, which was Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister. And this is another book of the month book. I read Wrong Place, Wrong Time at some point last year, and I was not a fan. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was a solid, like, mystery thriller, but it didn't do anything for me that I felt like other books hadn't done, or at least hadn't done better. When I picked this up, I actually didn't realize that Gillian McAllister was the same author of Wrong Place, Wrong Time. And I'm kind of glad that I hadn't realized that, because I may not have picked this up. There's music playing, there's a cat, there's so many things going on right now. When I picked this up, I really only knew like the vague synopsis of the fact that her husband is, Camilla's life is about to change forever. After months of maternity leave, she goes back to work, and Luke, her husband, is involved in a hostage situation. And with that knowledge alone, I don't know, apparently I have a thing for hostage situations, because this goes back to anxious people. I don't know. Famous last words. I really enjoyed. I gave it 4 stars. I probably could give this 4.5 stars, but I do think there was a few points in the book where I was confused, and it wasn't like I was supposed to be confused. It was the writing that confused me. So I think that with this one, I certainly enjoyed this more than I enjoyed Wrong Place, Wrong Time. I had a good time. I think that the concept of the hostage story and kind of hearing it through Camilla and not the person in the hostage situation is what made this very interesting. There's also a big time lapse. Well, there's a big gap of time, but you're reading it at present time. English? Can I talk? What is happening? You're reading the book in the present time the whole time, but there is a part in the story where like 7 years lapses and you're 7 years away from the hostage situation. And normally I don't think I like big time jumps, but for some reason it worked well in this story. I think that it actually added to the like suspense of what happened, because you already don't really comprehend what happened. And then now you're realizing like all this time has passed and even they still don't really know what happened. So I was invested, and I had a great time reading this, and it was a great way to close out my April reading. I had an amazing reading month. When you really look at it, I had majority 4 stars, if not like 4 point something stars. And the only book I gave under that was White Cat, Black Dog. And even that's a little hard because those stories in there that I really enjoyed, I gave 4 stars. Just all of the other stories that I gave 2 or 1 star brought that rating down a bit. But overall, I had a pretty solid April reading month. And I am so excited to see if May can stay strong and do the same thing. So we will be back in May to talk about that. I also might do a little bit of a May reading plans video. I haven't quite decided yet because mood reader, naturally. So we will see if I do that. And happy reading. Happy April wrap up. Happy Show Your Cat Day. Can you hear him purring? Can you hear him? Are you purring? Purr for the camera. This is Cow. I don't know where Charlie is, but this is Cow. Isn't he handsome? Tell him he's a handsome boy in the comments. See? He agrees. And with that, I will see you in the next video.